Allow me to introduce Professor Changquan Zhan again for a short introduction.
Welcome back again, and the next section is Professor Heidi Larson, whom I also met back in 2014, and later on we had many workshops in Kyoto, and every time I brought our colleagues to attend, and met Larson several times, and she is wonderful. Yeah, that's really influenced a lot of my thoughts of how to make NTU College of Public Health become interdisciplinary and look at this social science and humanities roles in public health. And so we are glad she can come this time and talking about one of very important issues we are facing is why people are hesitant to take vaccinations now. And so I won't spend too much time, but welcome Heidi again, and I will let our colleagues to introduce you in thorough. So with this, can you give her a big applause? Okay, thank you, Heidi.
Thank you, Dr. Zhan, for the welcome address. It's my pleasure to present you Dr. Wanting Huang. She's a Chief Medical Officer, Taiwan Centers for Disease Control. She also serves on the Science Board of Brighton Collaboration and an executive member of CEPI-funded state safety platform of emergency vaccine. So let's welcome her as the moderator of this session.
Good evening. I think I have this slide. This is Heidi Larson. 应该有我。我的名字第二个，对，是。呀，谢谢。Okay, so welcome to the symposium on addressing the threat of vaccine hesitancy. My name is Wanting Huang. I'm Chief Medical Officer of Taiwan Centers for Disease Control, and I'm the organizer and also moderator of this symposium. So we know vaccine hesitancy is not new. Back to the 1802, the COPAC, or the wonderful effect of the new inoculation, has described and started a controversy that would last into the 20th century. So in this famous James Gillray's famous caricature, you can see here that Edward Jenner is shown inoculating a frightened young woman against smallpox at St. Pancras Hospital. And Jenner holds her right hand and gashes with his knife, and from the patient's miniature cows sprouts or leaf. And understanding the dynamic of public confidence is key to maintaining the success of immunization programs when the risk of wild disease virtually disappears. The acceptance of risks from the vaccines also diminishes. Public confidence in vaccination has to be maintained with timely intervention about the safety of vaccines when or even before the target disease disappears from public attention. Therefore, we must not wait until vaccine coverage rates fall due to the loss of public confidence. In Taiwan, the government initiated the national immunization program since 1940s for infants and children through 6 years of age. Currently, we have 10 vaccines that are included in the immunization schedule to prevent 13 infectious disease. And in preschool, children, vaccination coverage for primary and booster doses is as high as more than 93%. Although you can see here, seasonal influenza vaccination coverage is typically lower, as it is from elsewhere in the world, ranging from 40% to 50%. So, is or will there be vaccine hesitancy a problem in Taiwan? So the first global survey of attitudes towards science has revealed an emerging crisis of confidence in vaccines in Taiwan. Here it shows that only 57% of people in Taiwan thinks vaccines are safe, and compared with 78% worldwide. I know Heidi may have more updated information on this, so we look forward to it. And furthermore, only 76% of people acknowledge that vaccines are effective, and 89% say their children has received a vaccine, while more people worldwide would agree. People's trust in medical and health advice, fortunately here, remain high, especially from doctors, nurses, and even the government. So nowadays, confidence seems to be a word of the year in public health. But here, I also would like to emphasize the importance of humility and warn against overconfidence. So I will quote it St. Paul and William Shakespeare. Here, let him who thinks he stands be careful that he doesn't fall. And from the Macbeth, that you all know security is mortal's greatest enemy. So we must avoid it overconfidence at all costs. Sir William Grantham is among the earliest to recognize this. And here I quote, "It is for us and for those who come after us to see that the sword which vaccines and antiserum have put into our hands is never allowed to tarnish through overconfidence, negligence, carelessness, or want of foresight on our part." So in November 1966, Sir Graham Williams delivered a series of 4 lectures on the hazards of immunization at the Heath Clark Lecture at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, where he concluded with those wise and insightful words on humility. And more than 50 years later, we have Professor Heidi Larson from the same school here to share with and inspire us about the emerging global threats of global vaccine hesitancy. So what a beautiful coincidence. And now it's my honor to introduce Professor Larson. So Professor Larson is an anthropologist and director of the Vaccine Competence Project. The Vaccine Competence Project is a WHO Center of Excellence on addressing vaccine hesitancy. So her research focused on the analysis of social and political factors that would affect update of health interventions and influence policies, and particularly on rumor and risk management, ranging from clinical trials to delivery and building public interest. So before joining the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, Professor Larson previously headed the global immunization communication of UNICEF and chairs the Gavi's Advocacy Task Force, and also served on the WHO SAGE Working Group on Vaccine Hesitancy. So the floor is now yours, Heidi.
I have to confess, I haven't read The Hazards of Immunization, so I have new homework. I have this esteemed title of emerging. It's kind of strange to be well known for a problem, but I have been focusing on this problem of vaccine hesitancy for 10 years now, actually 20, 10 as an organized research group, and myself as an independent researcher for almost 10 years before that. As WHO has acknowledged, we have a global issue of vaccine hesitancy, and I founded the Vaccine Confidence Project, which is a multidisciplinary research group 10 years ago in January. We're based at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, and we recognize and investigate confidence in products, in vaccines, confidence in providers, and confidence in policymakers and systems. We see more and more that the issue of vaccine confidence is one of confidence in the system. Sometimes it's not really the vaccine that people have an issue with. It's the people or the systems or the manufacturers where they have an issue of confidence. And that's one important thing we try to understand where that issue is. This is my team in London. We all have regional as well as issue technical specific areas, but this is just the core team in London. We have a network of researchers around the world, including some collaborators here, and look forward to growing that. And I was just talking with some of the high school students about a local project. One thing that the students and collaborators really like is there's room for everyone to participate in this global investigation of what is driving the questioning around vaccines. Okay. As I mentioned, WHO this year in January, or at the beginning of this year, I should say, named, actually this is a problem with media. They didn't call it anti-vax movement. They said vaccine hesitancy is one of the top 10 global health threats, alongside air pollution, alongside climate change. That's the level of seriousness that they're concerned about with this emerging issue. Already in 2010, Margaret Chen had written in her report to the executive board the days when health officials could issue advice based on the best medical and scientific data and expect populations to comply may be fading. I crossed out the may because it is fading, as her successor, second successor, acknowledged. Vaccine hesitancy, it's a global problem. It's not anyone's neighborhood, but it's all getting connected, and I think that's one of the dynamics that our group is particularly looking at. A lot of the research on this topic is very local, very time-centered, and what we're pulling the lens back and looking at the connectedness of it all, because that's really one of the concerns that, and also one of the aspects that has not really been looked at by other researchers. This is a map that we had published in an article on the spread of hesitancy issues around the HPV vaccine following Japan's suspension of their proactive recommendation of HPV. It's actually over 6 years now since they suspended that proactive recommendation. And what I remind them when I meet with them almost every year, don't just think about Japan, this is having an impact on the rest of the world. Even as you know, just you don't have to go far. You can see in the news, this is not just an issue of higher income countries or particular religious or ethnic groups. This is quite global in general groups. The issue of social media and is, again, not just in one part of the world, and one of the things that is contributing to the globalization of perception is social media, and it is highly connected, moving fast and changing. This is the US, but one pattern we see across all the studies and research and in our own research on vaccine hesitancy and confidence, safety keeps coming up as the #1 anxiety. Is it safe? Is it safe? Europe is actually one of the most skeptical in the world in our global studies, but it depends on where you sit, where you live. It's very much depending on where you live. If there's one objective, one mission that the Vaccine Confidence Project has is metrics, measures. Because one of the reasons I set up this group was that nobody wanted to take this issue seriously because they felt like it just wasn't big enough, it was fringe. The question I got was how much? How much? Is it really a big problem? How big of a problem is it? Where is it? How long is it? But it goes away, doesn't it? And so I thought the only way we're going to start getting any traction and influence to address this issue is to start measuring it. So the first thing we started with was online news media. I had modeled this initial monitoring initiative after there are a number of initiatives to monitor online news to detect early signals of disease outbreaks. And what I did was model this after it, but doing a different set of search terms that were looking for the emergence of vaccine rumors or signals of vaccine concerns. And we did well, we've been doing it for 10 years. I have an archive of going on 11 years of fully human coded and archived news against 33 different categories of vaccine concerns. But this was an analysis of 11 months, the second year. The first year, I wanted to wait until after we really had it refined and our sensitivity was higher. I have to say, a lot of the studies I read now, I mean, people do a Twitter analysis of 2 weeks, and you just don't see the kind of changes over time in 2 weeks. So this is 11 months, and you can see the darkest areas are the least confident, but this was, again, one slice that was published in 2013, and that was about 2011. And this was, we didn't even use social media, this was just online news media, because social media at that time was not ubiquitous as it is today. So there's been a dramatic change in the landscape, even in the 10 years that we've been measuring this issue. In 2015, we had realized with the media monitoring that it was a very valuable way to get signals of issues, but if you really want to understand what's driving it, you need a mix of measures, qualitative research, survey work. We'd set up a 24/7 monitoring of new published literature. You need multiple metrics to get the full story. So in 2015, we set up established the Vaccine Confidence Index, 4 key questions. Vaccines are safe, ? Effective, are they important, and are they compatible with religious beliefs? And that's on a strongly agree to strongly disagree category. In the last 5 years, we've collected over 300,000 data points, 300,000 people interviewed with these questions with all their gender, age, education, location. That's another big difference between the survey work and the media, social media monitoring, is that you don't always know where people live. You don't even actually know sometimes if it's a person or a bot. Whereas with this index, we have we know who's behind the sentiment and what they're reporting. Our benchmark report was the State of Vaccine Confidence in 2015, and we published a scientific article that had the core new research in it in 2015, introducing a global vaccine confidence index. In 2016, we ran the index in 67 countries. It has since been adopted by the EU. We ran it in 2018 and we'll be rolling it out even farther in 2020. They want us to also expand with confidence among healthcare providers, because one of the concerning trends that we see in the world is that a number of healthcare professionals and providers themselves are starting to question not all vaccines, but some. And as we just heard, healthcare professionals and providers in any study I've ever seen to date are the most trusted. It's about the only trusted person that people make their, that influence people's vaccine and health decisions. So if they're the most trusted and they're starting to waver in their confidence, we have a problem. So this was the 67-country study map of the world for the question, vaccines are safe. The darkest areas are the least confident, disagree that vaccines are safe, strongly disagree. As you can see, the color on the map is actually not that different from our online media monitoring, which gave us a kind of validation that the different metrics were in sync with each other, but you get a bit more nuance here. I think Europe was a bit surprised to see this. This study really went all over the media in France, and actually really the Ministry of Health, I thought if anyone called me and said, your study is rubbish, we're not the worst in the world, they instead communicated with me, thank you. We knew we had a problem. You helped us understand how big of a problem it was relative to other people. So they, by the way, since then have put a lot of efforts into their building confidence and engaging with the public, and actually they're doing better. What was driving this confidence? We did a lot of work. We do a lot of work with the European Centers for Disease Control to get more qualitative research on understanding what's driving it. The fear of side effects is really the overwhelming response that people had. And again, you know, when you start to no longer see the dramatic effects of some of these diseases that vaccines prevent, your risk perception shifts to the vaccine when you don't see the pressing threat and the risk of the disease. Even though the risk is there, it's not as visible. So it's kind of a normal human behavior to shift your risk perception depending on what is the most evident to you. The low risk of contracting a vaccine-preventable disease, or a perception that it's not severe. We have a big perception issue with influenza in the world. It seems to be the infectious disease that people take the least seriously and is one of the biggest killers. I mean, in 2018, it was, initially they thought 80,000, but I think it's 65,000 people died in the US from flu. And you can't not call that serious. But still, people say it's just the flu. So there's something we have to do on that one, because it could be even worse. As I mentioned with the EU, we've been doing more on GPs, vaccine perceptions, but we also wanted to add the question, would you recommend it to others? Because it's one thing if you have your own perceptions, but is it starting to influence their own recommending behavior? And we picked flu and MMR, so in general, except for in Slovakia and Czech Republic, they were reasonably positive in their recommendation for the childhood vaccines and general vaccines, but then we looked at the high-risk group of pregnant women, and that's where their confidence in recommending wobbled significantly. And if you're a pregnant woman, you're highly unlikely to be getting your flu vaccine in Slovakia, Czech Republic, and even Poland. So one of the things that this index allows is that you can see change over time. The big reason we wanted to monitor vaccine confidence is it's a predictor. It comes before you see a change in your vaccine uptake. That's why, and if you monitor it, if you start to see a drop in confidence, it gives you an opportunity to do something about it before you see a change in your vaccine uptake. Taiwan, for instance, as you just heard, is doing pretty well in terms of the high uptake of childhood vaccines in particular. But, and I do have a bit more data on the sentiments, the public confidence is wobbling, I would say, and not so high. So you have a huge opportunity. You want to keep that vaccine acceptance as high as you can, and not take for granted that it's going to stay there. So the whole idea of the confidence index is as to anticipate and get ahead of the curve before you have a crisis, which is much harder to turn around. For instance, in the EU, we were comparing the it was published in 2016, but the data was collected in 2015 and 2018, and looking at what went up and what went down. And we flagged Poland as a place that needs quite a bit of attention because it had a pretty dramatic drop in their confidence. And we know from other sources that there is a growing, strongly growing movement. What's interesting in Poland is that it feels like it's freedom from a more repressive political leadership. They've translate this freedom from government control to include vaccines. So vaccines were one of the things that was required and mandated by the previous regime. So now that we're free, we don't have to take vaccines anymore. And there's a lot of association. I was looking at Peter's book, AIDS Between Science and Politics, and I think, you know, the vaccine, increasingly, I think we could put a number of health areas in that title, and AIDS was a big leader in recognizing these trends before a lot of people. And again, that was a bit of a window on Europe, but this is not a uniquely high-income country phenomena, or middle-income country even. In low and middle-income countries, again, the concerns about harm and adverse event and side effects are among the top reasons for hesitancy. In India, of the children that are under-vaccinated in the country, 60% were not vaccinated for hesitancy reasons. Sometimes in the poorer countries you assume it's an access issue, but we should never assume anything unless we investigate it, is one big learning. In Brazil, again, South America historically has been, I would call it the poster child of positive vaccination, but it's also facing a growing trend of questioning and issues. In Brazil, 62% of the concerns and hesitancy about vaccines were safety related. And it's an issue. In 2018, as you just heard, the Wellcome Global Monitor, this is a global monitor of public trust in health and science. It's a much bigger study of a lot of domains of public trust in health and science and scientists and health professionals. But they had a special theme chapter on vaccines where they used our Vaccine Confidence Index. So we have the Vaccine Confidence Index data from 144 countries. And this is a regional picture of of the vaccine confidence going from low to higher. You can see on the top in Asia, Taiwan is not to the total bottom, but you're on the lower end. Japan and South Korea were the lowest. Japan, I think the HPV situation has really undermined some of the wider confidence and safety. And what we see is that it just takes one vaccine where there's anxieties and issues to have a knock-on effect on broader confidence. Not always, but when I see a drop, I ask, was there a safety event, or is this a new issue or another perception? Maybe it's not safety, it's not always safety. I just put the numbers down here. This is Central and Eastern Europe, a number of countries that were in one project we had, and I just put Taiwan in there to see how you rank with others. I mean, Armenia, let's see, Moldova. You're fitting a bit more with the Eastern European countries there in terms of your confidence and safety and effectiveness, even though I think your systems are probably much stronger. So I think understanding why is that, and the index doesn't answer the why. The index flags where there's an issue, and then it helps you know where you have to start asking questions. Some people say, well, you know, some of researchers are always like, well, you know, you didn't do this and you didn't do that. But I think from a public health community perspective, people appreciate it. And this, I see this as part of a cascade of investigations. No one can afford to do the depth of investigation you need to really understand a local issue. But to know where to do that, I think the index is pretty helpful. This is brand new data that is, we're in a broader study we're doing on pregnant women's willingness to take vaccines. Within that bigger study, we plugged in our vaccine confidence questions to understand what these women thought of vaccines in general, because it's always important to see what do people think about vaccines in general and then look at a specific vaccine. And this was the low end of there's a lot of countries that were in this study, but I just took the lowest 6 in importance, safety, effectiveness, and compatibility with religious beliefs. And Taiwan was in the lowest 6, frankly, the lowest 3 in the safety and effectiveness questions. That's the most recent data. That was this year. So that's consistent with 2018, and I would urge and happy to collaborate with anyone in trying to understand why and where attention is needed. So confidence is in, as I mentioned in the beginning, not always specific to the vaccine, but the policy and the process behind. If we look at in this region, China, as I'm sure you know, has had a few real betrayals of public trust. Companies that have said they were following the safety measures and they weren't. In one case, the company, it was a whistleblower inside. In another case, it was a pharmacist and her daughter who, over a decade, had managed to be buying vaccines that were about to go off the expiry date, relabeling and reselling. And it was throughout the system, everybody made about 5 cents. But it became a really quite wide network, and it was exposed and created a real, the public really lost trust that the system didn't catch it sooner and didn't act on it. And so there were a sequence of 2 or 3 events, which became even worse when a WeChat post that was talking about it was deleted. So it was adding to a level of distrust. and it's not just a China issue. In Indonesia, there were fake vaccines being exposed that were made, and they were real fakes, not just fake news about fake vaccines. It was really vaccines that were made, and others that were relabeled with, that were not made by GSK, but put a Western label on them because they are more respected than local ones, so it was a fake labeling. But these issues, they're not just here, they're in other countries, but when the underlying processes are not trusted, it makes people anxious. They either try to go somewhere else, or if they don't have that opportunity, they don't take it at all. So here there was a study on the loss of confidence, and you can see it's dropped. And I'm collaborating with China CDC and Fudan University. We're setting up a countrywide vaccine confidence monitoring system using our index, but adding some locally relevant questions on it. And we've done that in 3 different provinces. We're just analyzing the data now, which is very interesting data. You have another neighbor that's had some issues, as I'm sure you know, with the new dengue vaccine. We had run our vaccine confidence index there in the global study in 2016, and it was nearly a year after they launched, rolled out the new dengue vaccine. 850,000 children had gotten the vaccine. Sanofi announced that there was a newly confirmed risk that if you didn't have any previous exposure to dengue, you didn't have to be sick from it, but if you weren't, for instance, living in an endemic area, you had more risk of serious illness after the vaccine. Now in Brazil, which also rolled out the vaccine at the same time, but not in a more cautious way, not to as many people, relabeled the vaccine, retrained the health workers, and got on with it. But it fell on a politically volatile environment, and I'm sure you've read the saga that's gone on. It not only caused a drop in confidence in dengue vaccine, but it was a total breakdown in trust in the system. In our 2015-20 published 2016 data, the Philippines had some of the highest confidence in vaccines in the world. And as you can see in 2018, the red, the negative, the do not agree, went up significantly even in the importance, safety, and effectiveness of vaccines. What fascinated me is that they didn't even think it was compatible with their religious beliefs anymore. And I talked to some people through some Skype interviews, and then had some local researchers on the ground try to find out, and they said, you know, religious belief is about faith and trust. We had faith and trust in the system, and we've lost that, so it's not compatible. We don't have faith and trust in this system anymore, so it's not compatible with our religious beliefs. So it wasn't about ideology per se, it was about the issue of trust. Oops, there was another slide here. Let's see. In the meanwhile, I lost an image there, but there was an image about this in the loss of confidence in the Philippines. There were people stopping to take their measles vaccines, and there was a massive measles outbreak. And then in September, you probably heard about the polio case in the Philippines, which was also exposing under-vaccination. Well, this past week in Malaysia, actually closer to the Philippines, there was a new case, the first in almost 3 decades, that was apparently related to the same strain from the Philippines. So I would encourage you to make sure you have polio vaccination stays up to as high as possible, because one of the challenges with the state of polio eradication right now is that we've done such a good job in most of the world with getting rid of circulating wild virus, is that we don't have any more natural immunity, as it were, and we're very dependent on the vaccine until we fully eradicate. And we are almost there, but we have to still be vigilant, as these cases show. One of the phenomena that I see that's happening around the world is the growth of alternative, pro-health, pro-alternative, homeopathy, naturopathy opportunities. And I see it as a kind of opportunism because they see a lot of people saying, don't take vaccines, and they jump in and say, oh, I've got something better for you. And here he was promoting his tawa-tawa in Indonesia with the big anti-measles and anti-polio vaccine campaigns in the last couple of years. There was a natural healer promoting cupping. And I'm sure you're familiar with cupping, but that was also, and she was getting quite a following. And in South India, there were other faith healers. In Europe, homeopathy, many places you go. In England, there's a very strong and growing group of mothers, young mothers, and they have a network called Arnica, which it's a cream that you put on for wounds, but they're using it for to name their group. And actually, this group did not start being against vaccine. They started being pro-natural birth at home birth, pro-gluten-free, natural foods, a lot of just natural ways, including no more contraceptives, rhythm method only, and some of them started to say, but we can't do vaccines if we're going the natural way. So some of them had no intention to stop vaccines, but now are not, because that's part of a lifestyle. But again, this is jumping into opportunities where people are losing trust in modern medicine. And then we have another problem, another challenge. I mean, there are some real safety concerns. So there are things that we need to do as a public health and medical and scientific community, and that's to do everything we can to assure the safety of vaccines and in the administration of vaccines. But sometimes the safety signals are fake, and that's a problem, in addition to the overall sentiment, and again, capitalizing on an environment of distrust. In Pakistan, we had a major panic and a drop in acceptance of the polio vaccine because someone put a fake vaccine of a group of boys, quote, fainting and poisoned by the polio vaccine. Now, anyone who actually saw this WhatsApp video, you can be a 5th grader and know that this was faked. These boys, the person said, these vaccines are poisonous, don't take them, and he nudges one of the boys who lies down, and then 3 of them lie down next to it, and one of them, starts rolling his eyes and with looking like, am I doing it right? But it was dramatic. 70,000 people there was a whole drop in polio vaccine. And the reality is that we still have oral communication, as they call it in the South Pacific, coconut wireless. I think that 70 to 80% of the people who did not take the vaccine never saw this video, but heard about it. Or they heard about it, it was read on the radio. Or someone took one picture of this WhatsApp and put it on a poster. These things have a cascade, a multiplying effect, amplifying effect through a number of different ways. And I think the focus on only social media is missing the point. It's one piece of a larger chain of information, misinformation, and disinformation. Similar thing was happening with girls in South India. And this is also following scenes of girls fainting after HPV vaccine, which actually did happen. But this is imitating. There's a lot of mimic behavior on vaccines. I'm increasingly working with physicists and mathematical modelers who are looking at group dynamics, social networking. This was an analysis of every dot, he calls it a blob, is a community, so, or an organization. Like one of the larger blue dots is the Gates Foundation. A number of these could be a Facebook page, a group, a network, could be, you know, you could have Taiwan CDC as a blob. I mean, it's an organization or a group. The blue is positive groups promoting vaccines. The red is are negative groups. The green are undecided communities, groups who haven't made a decision yet about vaccine. In this time period, this was just in November, and I think it went back 3 months, 317 anti-groups. It was 4.1 million users, 124 pro-groups, which had a bigger group of users. But what is the most important point of this analysis is that you can see that the negative groups are far more nimble and broader, and the blue is a tighter group. The anti-groups are recruiting people who are undecided 500% times faster than the pro. So they're more nimble, they're going more into social media spaces, they're engaging in ways that the more official communities are staying with kind of more formal ways of communication. So we need to get more nimble, more engaged, more involved with different types of communities and get more engagement going on. Sorry, I was just reading a message here, a signal that we have to wrap up. I had written an article raising concern about the biggest pandemic risk is viral misinformation, and I still believe that. And then just a last bit here, I had mentioned that the mimic behavior of the boys, there has been a series of real mass psychosomatic reactions, groups of fainting, mobility issues among girls in Japan, and this relates back to the first map, but then that was mimicked and similar experiences in Denmark, in Ireland, in Colombia, 600 girls across multiple schools, and all pointing to the HPV vaccine. Well, these were real symptoms. These were not fake symptoms. These are girls who had pain, they had eating disorders, they had involuntary twitches, paralysis in multiple settings for different reasons. And it caused a drop in Japan and a dramatic drop in vaccinations. And because it's already been over 6 years, we now have data on the impact on high-grade cervical lesions. And those who had the opportunity for vaccination have a much lower risk than the unvaccinated. So hopefully that'll help them change their policy. But the new phenomena that WHO just acknowledged this year is that we may be witnessing, this is a psychogenic illness expert, where a primary agent of these symptoms and spread are actually provoked by social media. So we have a whole new actor in this domain that we need to start taking into account. And they're about to launch, this was a pre-press booklet, a new guidance for governments, for CDCs, for ministries of health on immunization stress-related responses, because they're paralyzing vaccination programs, they're concerning governments who don't know how to deal with this, And the idea is that by getting healthcare professionals familiar with what can happen, what they can do to mitigate it, to make the vaccination experience as comfortable, as welcoming, as reassuring as possible. And I think we have to not just, again, be thinking about the vaccine, but the provider, the vaccination experience, and then the policy and the politics. But just to end on risk as feelings, risk as analysis, risk as politics, we're pretty good at the middle, not so good at the other two. We need to do better. I was going to go into some of our AI learning, but it's okay, we don't have time. This is my, but anyway, we're moving more into machine learning and AI to be more responsive to the public. This is our website, Monitor, Inform, and Protect. Sorry it went on a bit. Thanks.
Thank you, Professor Larson, for the very inspirational speech, and also leave us some homework for us to boost our confidence for vaccination in Taiwan in the future years. We hope to see a better data for Taiwan. And we'd like to present some of the souvenirs for Professor Larson. May we invite Professor Changquan Zhan to be on the stage to present the souvenir.
So we do have 3 local panelists. So, so it's my honor to introduce Professor Bin Li from National Taiwan University. So Professor Li is the leader of pediatrics in Taiwan and worldwide, and he currently serves as the chair of the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practice in Taiwan, and is also former president of the Asian Society for Pediatric Infectious Disease. So Professor Li will address the issues of vaccine hesitancy in pandemic influenza preparedness.
Thank you. As we know, the H1N1 pandemic influenza started in the midst of 2007. It spread to the whole world within several months. At that time, we pay much attention to the spread of the pandemic influenza to trying to mitigate the spread of H1N1 pandemic influenza. We have a so-called 2-3-5 intervention policy. That means if the class should be suspended for 5 days, if 2 classmates have influenza illness within 3 days, 2-3-5 intervention policy. However, you can see that after the policy, after the school has been opened after the summer vacation, the number of suspended class continues to increase, and more patients die of pandemic influenza. So such an intervention policy may not be very effective. The epidemic curve went down only after the start of influenza vaccination program in students. So it shows us that influenza vaccination is the more effective way to control influenza, including pandemic influenza. In that period, from 2009 to 2010, a total of 6 million persons have received the pandemic H1N1 influenza. And there are many coincidental events happened after the vaccination, including fetal deaths, hearing impairment, severe parvovirus B19 infection, stroke, coma, and psychogenic reactions that Heidi has mentioned previously. All these events were suggested to be directly causally related to H1N1 influenza vaccine per se. So this news report created a major crisis in vaccine confidence in 2009. So with this exaggerated news report, the number of vaccine used decreased and going down to 0. And the number of claimed vaccine-related injury increased dramatically during that period. And in that season, we have a total of 543 claimed pandemic H1N1 influenza vaccine-related injury to our compensation program, 553. The most common complaints are psychogenic reactions. It is anxiety reaction to the vaccination. It is not due to the vaccine per se. And only a small proportion of the claim injury is really maybe causally related to the vaccine, including skin rash, allergic reaction, or Guillain-Barré syndrome. The US CDC used the term fainting or syncope to describe the post-vaccination psychological reaction. I don't like these terms. I think these terms are wrong. The symptoms developed after the vaccination are beyond the scope of simple fainting or syncope. There are, in fact, several symptoms related to your psychological reaction. I think the reaction may be divided to two groups. One group, I call it, one group is more transient. It is a transient reaction. I call it anxiety reaction that may not last for a median of 2 years. Common symptoms include dizziness, headache, nausea, vomiting, tearing, urine, tinnitus, etc., including hyperventilation, etc. And the other type of reaction is more prolonged, and I call it conversion disorder. And that may last for a median of 24 days. And the symptom is more dramatic. In addition to the anxiety symptom, they may be involuntary movement, pseudo seizure, or pseudo paralysis. Pseudo paralysis is the most common symptom during the H1N1 influenza season, because that Professor Larson, Heidi Larson had mentioned, the symptom may be infectious. The conversion disorder is infectious. If one see one patient with paralysis appeared on TV, other one will mimic the reaction, and all these girls become paralytic. In fact, they have no problem. And these are not simple fainting or syncope. It is a anxiety, psychological reaction. And during that season, we have a total of 543 injuries. I do an analysis. The incidence of vaccine-related injury, claimed vaccine-related injury, is higher in area, more in favor, more in support of the ruling party, the blue one, KMT. And the incidence is higher, is lower in the blue one. The incidence is higher in areas more in support of the opposition party, the green one. The p-value, 0.006, very significant. So the vaccine safety issue has become a political issue in 2009 in Taiwan. In fact, we know that the pandemic H1N1 influenza vaccine we use were very safe. They are very safe. 90% of them are made in Taiwan. 10% of them was imported and they are made by the Novartis. And according to our analysis, our influenza vaccine did not associate with increased incidence of Guillain-Barré syndrome. This is similar to the vaccine used in other countries, including France, Sweden, UK, Europe, and the exception is Canada and US. Some reports from this area showed a significant rise of Guillain-Barré syndrome, but this is not true for Taiwan. So our vaccine is very good. And this report from the Dr. Huang Wangting also shows that the vaccine is very safe for pregnant women. The rate of spontaneous abortion in the vaccinated pregnant woman is not higher than those without vaccination. And even the rate is lower than those without vaccination. So the influenza vaccine do no harm to the mother, do no harm to the fetus. However, many people just don't believe it. In that season, 2009 to 2010, 6 million people received H1N1 influenza vaccine. That corresponds to 26% of our total population. So our CDC is very unhappy, only 26%. And this is also true. This is also true in the States. This data show the curve, the vaccine uptake curve in the States. They have also the crisis in the vaccine confidence. So at the end of the season, the overall vaccination rate was 30%, very similar to our vaccination rate. So many influenza vaccine has been wasted, and US CDC is also very unhappy. So there has been much criticism on H1N1 influenza vaccination policy on US CDC. I know that because I attend an international conference discussing about the pandemic H1N1 influenza vaccination. And I heard one expert from the States, he commented that in the States, the vaccine was very good. The vaccination program was very good. However, the communication sucks. Okay, that's the comments. So many ones think that the vaccine, the skill for risk communication is the major reason for vaccine hesitancy, for a low vaccine acceptance rate. They think if you improve your communication skill, you may raise the overall vaccination rate. However, let's look at this slide. This data also come from the conference. And before the vaccination program has been started, the US CDC do a questionnaire survey in one community. And some person in that community say that they will definitely receive the vaccination in the future. Most of them kept their promise, and finally they did receive vaccination. At the beginning of the vaccination program, some persons say that they will probably receive vaccination. Many of them are liars. Many of them did not receive vaccination. So I think this data illustrates that the acceptance and the acceptance of vaccination rely heavily on your previous knowledge and your previous attitude about influenza and the vaccine. The communication may turn to fail for those who just don't believe it. They have only a little knowledge, and a little knowledge is a very dangerous thing, as we know. So, I see many so-called professional personnel also had only a little knowledge. I think this is a very important point. Let's see what professional personnel in Taiwan said in news media during that season. They say that I will not receive H1N1 vaccine. They say the performance of Taiwan CDC is extremely poor. I question about the safety of Taiwan-made vaccine. Someone said that vaccine may induce abnormal immune reaction, and he suggests that the autoimmune disease occurring after vaccination is directly related to influenza vaccination. So, this fact reflects the fact that many doctors have not been well educated about vaccination. People believe in doctors. They think all doctors are experts in vaccination, but in fact, they are not. They are not. So, the number of vaccines used continue to fall. One day I say to our journalists that I will not say anything about H1N1 vaccine. they are quite disappointed, and they encourage me to continue communication. I said the reason. I said, I think continue communicating is useless. I told them my black water and white water theory. When you add black water into white water, the water will still be black. Someone who has received incorrect information from the news media, the wrong information will continue annoying him. He will not believe in vaccine. Then he will question about the vaccine safety. I think vaccine hesitancy is inherent in democratic countries. There will be no vaccine hesitancy in only some specific countries. Someday I heard one comment on anti-vaccine activity. I quite agree with that. The speaker said that don't fight with pig. You both will get dirty and the pig enjoy it. So we cannot communicate with irrational animals. We can communicate with only rational human beings, right? So WHO has suggested, recommended many recommendations on the preparedness and response to pandemic influenza. Communication is among the top one priority. However, I haven't seen any recommendation for the accelerated vaccine safety concerns. It will happen in the next pandemic. What we can do, I think education is very important. Everyone should be educated about the vaccination, especially for medical students and all physicians. And the communication is very important. And I think some restriction on the media, including social media, news media, may be necessary in emergency situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Lee. You are as rhetoric as what I've known about you. So I will continue to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Chen Yi-Guan. So Dr. Guan is an anthropologist, and she currently is the assistant professor at the Institute of Health Behavior and Community Science of National Taiwan University School of Public Health. And in recent years, she has been involved in ethnographic investigation of childhood vaccination hesitance in Taiwan. And this is an emerging but less studied topic here in the country. So thank you, Chen Yi, and we look forward to your talk.
Okay. Good afternoon. It's my great honor to present my research here, particularly after that of Dr. Larson's. And the presentation of my research is vaccine hesitancy and parenting in Taiwan. So far, most of the research on vaccine hesitancy is done either in the Western country or the underdeveloped world. But we hear very little about that in the East Asia. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't occur in this area. So taking Taiwan as an example, I will show that some parents do decide to delay or reject vaccinating their children and share this perspective and experience through personal networks. As such, this decision-making becomes relatively under the table compared to anti-vaccine movement in other countries. And I started my ethnographic investigation last year and attempt to answer the following questions. Who are the parents feeling hesitant about vaccination? And what are they hesitant about? So based on my initial findings, I argue that these decisions are far from parents being ignorant or irresponsible. Instead, this decision comes from their constant struggle to meet their parental responsibility, which has been constantly redefined in changing social conditions. And the reason why vaccine hesitancy is hardly noticed in Taiwan, part of the reason is that the overall vaccination rate has been high in Taiwan. According to the statistic, the vaccination rate reached above 95% after 1980s and has been
among the globally highest. But the situation became a little bit different recently. In 2006, the vaccine hesitancy is reported in the mass media in Taiwan. A group of highly educated parents, they publicly questioned the safety and the necessity of childhood vaccination. And this hesitancy appeared to expand. In 2017, the Bureau of Health in Taipei City found that there were more than 8,000 students in the elementary school. They were under-vaccinated before the semester start. So they called for the cooperation for parents. And besides, in this couple of years, a group of parents whose children encountered the adverse event after immunization, they organized themselves together. And this group, they officially registered this year. So nowadays, even although the overall vaccination rate has been high, but one can easily find the anti-vaccine information on website. So I base my analysis on two theoretical perspectives. First of all, people have diverse risk definitions. So for example, vaccine hesitancy very often occurs among parents who use complementary and alternative medicine. This group of parents, they have different theory about body and diseases, and therefore define risk quite differently from that in biomedicine. Or for parents who reject to vaccinating their children based on their distrust in institution, they may define the malpractice in the government or the pharmaceutical industry as the major risk. And second, this vaccine hesitancy may also relate to the transforming norms in parenthood. For example, research in the US showed that vaccine hesitancy has a lot to do with the new idea that each child is unique. And every parent should really carefully observe and tailor their care according to each children's uniqueness. So in this way, many parents, they no longer follow the policy passively. Instead, they collect information and intend to make the responsible decision for their children. So for my ethnography research, I conducted observation in medical conferences and vaccine-related codes and the lecture and activity among various NGO and parental groups. And I also talked to parents, majorly those who delay or reject to vaccinate their children. But I also interview those who follow the policy and fully vaccinate their children for the purpose of contrast. And I also get to talk to the parents whose children encounter the adverse event after immunization, but their cases are quite complicated. I won't be able to address that experience in this talk. So, who are the parents feeling hesitant about vaccination and what are their concerns? In my research, these parents can be categorized into two groups, including those who use CAM and also those in the unconventional parenting group. So I will address their experience in more details. Among parents who use CAM, they majorly use Chinese medicine. And some of them also use homeopathy and other type of CAM. And this group of parents, they very often attribute their reject of childhood vaccination to their different theory about body and disease. For example, most of the parents here, they all emphasize the importance of letting kids build up their own immune system through the interacting with the viruses in the natural environment. So for them, the immune system built through vaccination is weak. And they believe that is evident from the fact that some children still get infected even after vaccinated. And also, these parents, through integrating camp in their daily care for their children and combined with good food and healthy lifestyle, these parents seek to prepare their children well for diseases. So here, it represents a very different kind of relationship with diseases as compared to that in biomedicine. As a mother mentioned here, to vaccinate is to help keep disease away from the child, but we use Chinese medicine to prepare the kids well to deal with the sickness. And most importantly, in this framework, vaccination is conceptualized as an intervention from outside, become an unwelcome interruption, and therefore itself a risk. The second group of parents come from the unconventional parenting community. The so-called unconventional parenting community refer to those who adopt parenting styles alternative to the mainstream ones. I recruit this group of parents through the network of homeschooling, waterfall school system, and home birth. This group of parents, they refuse to blindly obey the rules and emphasize the importance of self-determination. So for them, no matter what the issue is, being informed and having a chance to say yes or no is the basic. So they also learn to question the authoritative power and make their own decision from other movements that involve, such as the natural childbirth movement mentioned here. And probably because their low trust in institutions, these parents very often define the malpractice in the institution as major risk. This mother, when interviewed, she expressed her surprise that the government will implement the mandatory vaccination for HPV because she just saw the news of many adverse events happen in Japan, and she suspects something goes on behind. And more importantly, while deciding not to vaccinating their children, these parents devote their time and energy to so-called immune DIY, meaning that boosting the immune system of their children through healthy lifestyle. In doing so, many of my interviewees, they insist to give their children mostly homemade food and take their children to outdoor activities instead of having them staying home and watching TV. And many of them even move the whole family to the countryside for the same idea. So the idea is also to avoid the pollution from the modern lifestyle, which has been heavily industrialized. So here we see the vaccine hesitancy very often is not only about vaccine itself. It's also about the values and lifestyle choices. And most importantly, to do this kind of immune DIY requires a lot of time and energy for the parents. To show this vividly, here is a chart offered by a mother whose daughter goes to the waterfall schools. So the teacher and parents use this chart to record and communicate what the children eat and drink in every single meal, so that they will know what to adjust when something goes wrong with these kids. Here is more chart to record the children's sleeping time and other daily life details for the same purpose. So, so far I have shown that parents concerned about vaccine come from different places, but all of them mention the insufficient information as the most crucial aspect of their experience. The camp-using parents find that horrifying to inject something unnatural into the body of their children and eager to know the matter of the safety and the necessity of the vaccine. While those in the unconventional parenting community seek for information to make their own decision. In fact, even those who follow the policy and fully vaccinate their children express in our interview that they hope to know more about vaccine so that they won't feel so anxious while taking their kids to vaccination. So, So it's noteworthy to point out some social trend that may relate to the increased demand among parents who need the information. For example, the informed decision has become recently a norm in the field of health. So now individuals are expected to be the informed decision maker in terms of medical resources. So the whole responsibility of decision-making shift from the state to the individuals. So we see that nowadays parents and people, they no longer rely on the expert to make their decision. Instead, they have to collect the information and make their own decision. And that becomes largely a principle for everyone. But while seeking out to make their own decision, these parents mentioned that they barely found information they need, and that significantly reinforced their distrust in vaccines. So here I conclude that this vaccine hesitancy should be understood as the new parental ideals and the practice emerging in the changing social conditions. As I have shown that to assume these parents as ignorant or irresponsible can no longer let us get to the core of the problem. Instead, only having substantial understanding of these parents and their concerns can help to develop a more effective communication strategy. And for this regard, I would like to cite a sentence from another anthropologist who studied vaccine hesitancy. People are ready to listen if they are heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Guan. So now we have our third panelist, Professor Lu Hongyi. Professor Lu is professor of the Department of Communication and Graduate Institute of Telecommunications from National Zhongzheng University. And I know before Professor Li reached the academia, he has also served as a journalist covering health and medical topics in a national newspaper, Minsheng Bao, Minsheng Daily. And he is a show leader, scholar, and is very passionate and engaged in the community. And he will share with us his experience on using natural helpers in communicating health communication with vaccination.
Okay, thanks for Dr. Huang's invitation and introduction. I come from Jiayi in the southern part of Taiwan. I'm so happy to be here to share my own experience with you guys. And I would like to say that maybe my presentation is not that kind of academic, but I would think that it will be very thought-provoking to you, because I think when you attempt to initiate any health campaign, you need to think about what communication is. As some scholars has mentioned that communication is very important. We communicate every day, but actually we do not effectively communicate with each other. So that is very important. And actually I originally majored in journalism, and then I go to the different scope, especially in public health, and then I come back to health communication. So I think that is a very good explanation in my life. And first of all, let me talk about what is a community. I would say that if you go to a community, you can see that there is a sense of identification. They have the same religion. They have the same eating habit, and so on and so forth. And then emotional connection to each members, especially in the rural areas. They usually communicate by way of interpersonal communication. If they want to see a physician or want to go to any restaurant, they always consult with their neighbors instead of experts. And then we can see that they share their values and norms. And then they have the common interests. For example, they like to make tea under the tree, or they like to sing the karaoke. If you go to Jiayi, you can see lots of Asian people sing karaoke in the community, and I am that kind of person. So I usually go to the community with my t-shirt and with my short pants. Today is very formal to me, so I feel not the kind of person of myself. Especially when I speak English, I would like to speak Taiwanese because I'm a Taiwanese person. I speak Taiwanese fluently, so people in my country love me pretty much because I use lots of local words with them. Like, they would be very happy. They think, oh, you are a scholar guy, but you still can speak a lot of localized language with me. The last one is the mutual influence. My mom usually buy medicines from the radio station with my auntie, my neighbors, and they always tell a lie to me, saying I never do that. But when I tried to go to my mom's room, you can see lots of medicines coming from the radio station. That is horrible. I love this picture. If you go to Jiayi, this is a very specific place for women. They usually went to the farm and then went to the convenience store. They talk about the relationship between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law. Okay, yours is so good, mine is not the kind of, I like. They talk about some gossip and also something about what hospital is better. And if you want to go see a doctor, I would highly recommend that you go there or go here. And they always wear the same address. Could you see that? Their address is very specific. Okay, so I always encourage the daughter-in-law in Jiayi, if you want to buy a gift for your mother-in-law, please choose this one. Don't choose a very formal address. They don't wear that kind of address. Especially, they don't want to sit on chairs. They usually sit on baskets. Okay, so if we design a campaign, we don't like to put lots of very formal chairs over there. We say, okay, just sit on the baskets. And you can see that is a very specific phenomenon in my country. And if this lady, she got stroke, but she's still very functional in this group because she used this toy to get away of the flies and mosquitoes, So if you are OT, you will like her pretty much because she is very functional here. But for males, you can see that they love to make tea and drink beneath the tree in front of the temple. So I always use a Taiwanese phrase to describe their activity. That means they love to make tea under the tree, fucking the government policies. They are very healthy. You know why? Because they talk a lot and they express themselves, so they never depressed. So I love them. So if you want to do any campaign related to dementia, please go here. And you can see that they are good persons and they don't want to suffer from any depression. Because of that, so I'm thinking about their communication, especially interpersonal communication, because my dad always go to that kind of place, and when he comes home, he would like to share something heard from others with me. And so that's why I'm thinking about the importance of natural helpers when I tried to initiate any health campaign. And nature helpers, they usually are individuals who naturally turn for advice, emotional support, and tangible aid. And they are individuals in such positions, such as hairstylists, young ladies here, when you go to the salon, could you see that you take almost 1 or 2 hours, and then the hairstylist would like to talk with you. He talk about your family members, talk about, okay, which restaurants would be better, talk about your significant other. So when days goes on, when day goes on, you guys become good friends. That is why I'm thinking about that. Hairstylists or shopkeepers and clergy, especially in Taiwan, if you go to the temple, the spiritual leaders are very important. 表公. They are a very good communicator for flu shot. Let me tell you later on. And I always tell people that, okay, you are a layperson, but you are very important. When the physician tell the person, please open your eyes, but he didn't open his eyes, but when the volunteer saying, okay, just mimic me, and and you can see that he can open his eyes, his mouth easily. That's why I always tell volunteers at the Dalian Tzu Chi Hospital saying that you are so great. You need to tell yourself that I'm playing a very important role in imparting messages to patients. Okay, so I worked with women's cancers in Jiayi City. I did this campaign with Jiayi City. It's called 宠爱桃城水姑娘4癌筛检新主张. We focus on cervical and breast cancer in Jiayi. And you can see the slogans. I worked with the hairstylists. And hairstylists, when their customers go to their salon to have a haircut or wash their hairs, and they talk a lot about, okay, that is very important. You need to uptake the cancer screenings, and it will not take you any money. So when they talk about, because they have already become like family members or good friends, so when they talk a lot about cancer, they will not turn them down. And also say that you are so good. You share lots of good things with me. I so appreciate it, so I will come back again. Okay. And, you know, I need to educate the hairstylists to communicate with their customers. So I worked with business associations. So I got up very early every day, and I went to the salon to educate them and teach them how to communicate very well with their targets. And then you can see different pictures here. It's very interesting, and it's very, very impressive in my life. And I also use the online steaming. I use the online steaming to share all the messages with hairstylists and with targets in Jiayi City. That is, one day I just come by the salon and using my cell phone to do the online steaming immediately, and they think that is very interesting. Okay. Because of this experience, so I switch my study focus to flu shot, and you know why? Because I love to work with Asian people because I'm always the youngest one among them. So I always tell them that 阿公阿嬷我是你们的小鲜肉. I am your young hunk. It's the so-called stud muffin. Yeah. So when I work with them, I'm thinking about that. Okay, as a scholar, we usually read lots of literatures, and we try to find out the determinants of uptaking flu shot. But you can see that, okay, age or chronic disease or physical activities and so on and so forth, they may become important determinants of uptaking flu shot. But when you work too much on them, you still think about that as scholars here talking about that, okay, the importance of risk perception, that is very important. But people usually have the kind of personality, they are thinking about that, okay, others are more than likely to get flu than myself. That is kind of optimistic bias. And I'm also thinking about that social trust. HPV case is very important. When we watch TV programs and the TV news showing, okay, the danger of uptaking HPV in Japan, that could be very impressive to parents or to young ladies that will turn down that kind of invitation, saying that, no, I don't want to do that because I just heard or I just read some news in the newspaper. That is no good. So what piques the Asian people's interest, that could be very important. So I would say that you need to step into the community and think about what they are thinking, what kind of life they are engaged in. So I will show you some pictures. This grandmom, her story is so touching. If you give her a book bag, she will be very happy because they are usually illiterate. So if you tell them that, please come here, you just come here to learn knowledge, that would be very happy. Okay, and then, okay, you can see that if I show these pictures, this kind of pictures to my students, they have no feeling. That is very interesting because they have that kind of experience. But for Asian people, they will say that, okay, that is very good. I would like to come by. And they love to sing karaoke. So I love to step in the community because I became the kind of 五月天, so I can enjoy the music with them. And then they have that kind of book. Do you see that? They have the title of the song, the number of that song. And they will tell you that, okay, I want to sing a song, Mama是歌星625查甫调降2 key. Even that kind of melody, they will tell you that what their preference is. And I'm thinking about maybe this is just one single case, but when I go to another community, I just get the other one. So that means that singing is very important. So you can try to create a song with the message of getting flu shot. That could be very different. Okay, and they love to dance, and this kind of picture. And they love to eat. So if you try to make dishes, they will be happy to participate in your campaign activity. And if you give the lady a kiss, she will be very happy. They will not go away. Even they want to watch the TV program, 亲家买给搞娘家, they will stay with you all night long. And this is another one. A warm hug is very important. And religion is also very important. If you take a look at the head, especially the title of the temple and the name of the god, you have to say that 三太子叫你爱来住以红霞. That works very well. That works very well because for the shake of the god. So that's why I always initiate a campaign in front of the temple in Jai. I call that title is 廟埕開講. I am that kind of on Loa Sen. And I use the Taiwanese opera to impart the message of uptaking flu shot with them. So I can show you a video again very soon here. Okay, so please help me if anyone else can help me click the video very soon. Okay, this one. Okay. They are very happy that day because we want to tell them that please come by and uptake the flu shot that day. So okay. Because of time, so I just take a very quick look of this video. So I tried to make a campaign video for the people, especially for Asian people here. I work with the district public health center. I use this one to tell them that it's time to uptake the flu shot.
Say what? 你若要招领疤，
阿公爱注意风声，这个同款让我变成人。拜托大家12月7日来注意风声，保持咱的健康，自保庇。12月7日来注意风声。咱庄中的这老时代，12月7日。
They are lay persons without any experience of being an actor or actress. And it only takes me 1 hour to shoot this film. This is very important. Yeah, this film is very famous now in Jiayi County. And people love it, and it's free because they don't pay any money for me. I do it voluntarily. So they are very happy. And this morning, I particularly go to the district public health center to take pictures, thinking about that, how many people will come by to uptake the flu shot. This is one of the pictures. Okay, let's go to the next one. Okay, 下一张. Okay, so I'm so happy. It means that the campaign, it seems to me that it works. Okay, and I appreciate your attention. Sorry for overrun the time. Thank you so much.
We thank all the speakers for these wonderful talks. And the next section will be the panel discussion. We invite all of the speakers to come into the stage, and Professor Larson and the moderator goes to Dr. Wanting Huang.
So thank you for the presentations from Heidi and the panelists. So now I would like to turn the floor to the audience to see if you have any questions to the panel.
Yes. Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Larson and all the speakers here. I have a question because once I went to the United States NIH flu conference, I find out that they are discussing if the pandemic flu happens, if our vaccine is limited, who have the higher priority to be shotted. For example, I remember one of the scholars stood up. He was about age 70. He said, if the vaccine is limited, he would like to let his vaccine to give to children. So they have this kind of conversation and to collect the common sense, the common ideas before the pandemic happens. That is very important. But it is so hard to be done in the in Oriental society such as Taiwan. So I was wondering, any European or other situation have, because the pandemic flu will happen in the future. So, and by that time, the vaccine production may be limited. It's not just vaccine vaccine production will be limited. So what we should do and for the SOP or what are our common understanding, and so that the policymakers can do the best decision. That's my question.
So if I understand correctly, your question is who to prioritize? Well, I think it partly depends on the strain, because H1N1, for instance, was particularly unusually targeting. I mean, typically it's the elderly and infants that you want to protect, are most vulnerable. But so it varies a bit. But I think I understand the focus on children. I mean, we see the data on the impact of, if you have, for instance, with pneumonia, if children are fully vaccinated with their pneumo vaccines, the burden in the elderly goes down significantly because their children are really quite a vector of transmission. They get handed around from person to person. They're very interactive. And so they're a vector of transmission. So I would understand in that case with children, but I think every situation will need to assess. But I think that's, yeah.
I think in 2009 we have many discussions about the priority of the pandemic H1N1 influenza vaccine. Finally, we decided to put the medical personnel and the student at the first place because student, as Heidi had mentioned, it is the high spread group. In the usual seasonal influenza, high risk group will be the first priority, the elderly, those with comorbidity. However, in the initial stage of pandemic influenza, students and working men who can spread the virus in the community will be more important. And in the discussion for the priority of H1N1 influenza vaccine, I mentioned that those who are important to the Taiwan is also should receive the vaccine at the beginning, including the President Ma Ying-jeou. However, in the next day, the news media questioned about the necessity for giving vaccine to our president. I think 50% of persons in Taiwan like Ma Ying-jeou. The 50% don't hate it. They want him to be sick. So finally, he was not put into the priority list. That's ridiculous. Or that to mitigate the injury meant by pandemic influenza, one mission of the vaccine is to maintain social function. It is very important to maintain your medical function. So it is important that medical personnel should be in the priority, and the president, vice president, and many important professors here should receive the vaccine at the first place. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I see Professor Tu raise his hands.
I think today everyone and I enjoy this conference. It's so fruitful, and we talk about health, and we find that the public health, even political health, maybe is more important to make people healthier. So that sometimes we find that local help is maybe more useful than professor. So that I will share with you some experience when the SARS outbreak in Taiwan. I was the Minister of Health at that time and stepped down because of SARS. So I would actually the SARS epidemic in Taiwan, that's an emerging new disease we never met before. And for the all infectious disease, Taiwan public health system is one of the best in the whole world, so that we can handle it. But for emerging, we have no experience, so that it's very difficult for us, especially we cannot find help from WHO. We get help from the United States CDC. But actually, we try to delay the outbreak for some time. But finally, the outbreak began. And we are one of the country that the period of the outbreak is shortest, so it's get its control very fast. But actually, finally, we find that we have two epidemics, not one. The first one is viral outbreak, virus epidemic. But the next one is multi-million epidemics. So when the viral epidemic go to the maximum, the peak, then subsided. But the mass million epidemic just start. So, but actually really prove case, or we condemn case decrease. But the anxiety, the social anxiety increase. That make two epidemic. This is experience. And also we find that without the help of from the WHO, it's very difficult for Taiwan to start, so that we have more satisfied than expected. But still, we are one of the best in the whole world. So that I will also ask Dr. Bill to help Taiwan that we should go into WHO. We should be a member at least an observer, so that we can get help. We get help from WHO about 1 week of the outbreak. But the Vietnam and Hong Kong get help before 1 week before the first case, so the outbreak. So that's we need the help from the whole world. And because of the cooperation of the whole world, the virus find within weeks. From that maybe November or 2002, about 3 months or 4 months, the China covered the epidemics. They cannot find the virus. But after cooperation, international cooperation, the virus was found very quickly. So that's I will share that experience with you. Thank you very much.
Yes, please.
I'm Eric Chen of Kaohsiung Medical University, and I really enjoyed this session. I think it was well organized and the speakers are all well chosen. And I think I have a question regarding, is there a deeper, I don't know if it's a policy issue or more a fundamental issue of prioritizing what rights. I think we have a dilemma here in terms of not the choice between right and wrong, but between right and right. Informed consent, as was pointed out, it was something that was promoted, and I think generally everyone will agree that it's probably the right thing. But when informed consent hits up against public good in terms of having sufficient coverage for vaccination, how do you balance this, and is there any kind of research in this area, and how should we address this this kind of an issue? I think in terms of philosophy and ethics, there are some studies or discussion in this area, but more in the abstract form. But I think maybe this is some direction that public policy or public health can look into. I don't know if anyone has any comment about this.
So maybe all the panelists would like to comment.
Yeah. Well, I can, this has been the age-old dilemma since the very first vaccine. I mean, in fact, in the UK, which had the very first anti-vaccine league, was actually the anti-compulsory vaccine league. When the smallpox vaccination became mandated, people weren't sure about the vaccine in terms of it's against God's will and it's not natural. That was already circulating, but when it became a mandate, that's what triggered the organized anti-movement, and it was very specific about the compulsion and the mandate. When I mean, as you say, in a way it's right and right. They had a point. How can you mandate something that is not totally safe? And that's the same argument we hear. It goes back, and even though the vaccines today are safer than they've ever been, and some safer than, less risk than others, we still have that persisting question, and people are using that. We can't say that vaccines are 100% safe, but in most contexts, they're, given the risk of the disease, you have to make that argument. But it's a difficult one, and I think there are certain vaccines that we're not going to be able to mandate. Our challenge is that we need enough to keep the herd immunity. Measles is, to me, the canary in the mine, as they say, because it needs the highest coverage to keep that protection. We can get away with less on some of the other vaccines, but that's the one that is exposing our vulnerability. I mean, of course, with polio, it's different because we're trying to eradicate, but it's the eternal debate in vaccine. Your own. Yeah. Or anyone.
No, okay. Not all vaccine is not 100% safe. We know that, but we must emphasize that if you don't get vaccinated, you will be more in danger. For example, I have mentioned that Guillain-Barré syndrome is associated with influenza vaccine. The incidence may be 1 per million. However, recent evidence shows that if you get influenza, the incidence of Guillain-Barré syndrome is higher, much higher. So the overall incidence of Guillain-Barré syndrome will decrease after universal influenza vaccination program. This information should be given to the public. So I think the education is very important. We should educate all children. My ideal condition is to educate all persons with correct vaccination knowledge. Then when they are getting old, they have to receive the influenza vaccine, they will receive it. The present problem is that most people have only a little knowledge, and they judge by themselves. It is the reason why someone is so difficult to communicate with.
I wonder if Dr. Guan has comments on the.
Okay, thank you for this great question, and that is also a difficult one. Okay, I also encounter many parents in my interviews. They justify their decision of not to vaccine their kids by the so-called right of choice. But I agree with Dr. Lee and Dr. Larson that although it's right to emphasize the right of choice, but they are parents after all. So if you can make it very clear and very very understandable that the vaccine is necessary for them, and they would probably change their mind. And so I follow Dr. Lee's emphasis on education. I agree with that, but I think the whole communication strategy should be a little bit to kind of target the response of these parents, and sort of translate the language of scientific into the language of their use, so that that can be more effective communication.
Yes, Professor Chen.
We learned from this session that vaccine hesitancy is kind of global. But I'm wondering, particularly, Professor Larson, do you have any data to show, even it's a global phenomenon, but there's significant heterogeneity? For example, Professor Guan's study indicate there's a proportion of new kind of parents who are very different from traditional parents. They emphasize, about self-education and everything to try by themselves. And this is very different from some old people shown by another speaker. And so I'm thinking the study working in local tempo probably won't work for those new kind of parents. And the issue we are facing is, I think probably we don't know what's the relative proportion among our population. That means, how many parents now are more like Professor Guan's study showing, and how many people they still can, influenced by traditional tempo or centered activity. So the question is, it seems to me there's no, no one size fits all. You probably need a different approach to cover this problem, because the end result is vaccine hesitancy, but they are due to very different kind of reason. So I think it's probably we need a multifaceted, and I don't think there's any one universal solution can solve this problem. So, but I'd like to hear what's our panelists' comment on this.
Okay, I totally agree that we cannot use one size fits all. That kind of policy doesn't work very well. Especially when I step in community, I can see that if they are in the same area, but they still have the different religions, different personalities. I would like to share one experience of my own with you. When I came back from USA to Taiwan, I worked lots of studies focusing on condom use. And I tried to go over some health campaign. And most of the message looking like that, okay, very warm and very not like sensation-seeking approach. But when I worked with my professor, Dr. Pongring in Kentucky, he always told me that you needed to think about personality, take it into account when you want to initiate a condom use campaign, because you usually target the inappropriate targets and spend much money, much time, but it doesn't work very well. Yeah, so I think that is very important when we talk about education, but sometimes we do not understand what they need. Especially when I go to the communities, I can find that if you give them gifts, they will be there, but only for gifts. When you say, okay, I'm done, they usually take a nap over there, but our government usually like to how many people were there, how many times you tried to impart message to laypersons, but I think they doesn't take effective to people you want to target. Yeah.
I think we have are facing in addition to the local community preferences, religious, social, that's everywhere. There's diversity. But we do have a phenomena of a generation growing up with a smartphone in their hand. And it's a very different generation. There really is a generational divide, and I think we're going through not just a vaccine change, it's a bigger change in the whole environment. This is not some of the things that I talked about today is not unique to vaccines. It's happening in a lot of other domains. We've just actually starting to collaborate more with our Center for Climate Change and Planetary Health. Some of the dynamics around distrust in climate science and other, I have other groups in the school who are studying different health interventions, facing similar phenomena. There is a generation living on, on their phones, connected with each other. Some of these young women in Taiwan may very well be communicating with the Arnica group in England. And I wouldn't be surprised there, and the phenomena with the HPV reactions, there are communities evolving, and the people, and when it comes to solutions to this issue, we cannot move forward unless we engage younger people. I learn every day from my students, from my researchers. Denmark has had the most successful turnaround in their HPV vaccination distrust issue by bringing in a group of teenage girls to sit with the Institute for Public Health and co-create an immunization, HPV immunization campaign, which was peer-to-peer, which was informed with the evidence, because as Peter said earlier, you know, we can't lose evidence while we're trying to appeal to, you know, emotions. We can't lose the most fundamental part. But it is a change, because you have a generation of doctors, of health professionals, of policy and decision makers living in a different environment than one where there was more trust and respect of hierarchy. You know, one thing that this digital environment has done is totally flattened what was a much more hierarchical, particularly in medicine, modus operandi. So I think that there is a lot of local differences, but we also have a growing connected dynamic that just when the global public health community realized they had to get more local knowledge, things are getting more global in different ways. So we need both.
So I would like to follow Dr. Larson's and make some emphasis again on the strategy of communication. For this regard, as Dr. Larson's mentioned that now the new generation, they living on cell phones, and then they, whatever issue that is, what they to do the very first thing is to get online and find information. So the parents in my interview, they will say they get online and they find very little information from CDC or from other sort of official settings, but they found a lot information from the anti-vaccine website. They found this information as so responding to their concern, as so accessible compared to the other side. So that make a huge difference. So that's what I think we can address and for the future.
I think I and Heidi attend the recent SAGE meeting. In the SAGE meeting, I heard that WHO is now trying to communicate with famous social media, including Facebook, Instagram. They ask them to, when someone search for vaccine in your Facebook or Instagram, those appear will not be anti-vaccine website. So they are trying to do that. I think this is also important for Taiwan. When we are implementing the universal HPV vaccine, we also have the idea. We have to cooperate with someone famous in the website. And when something happens, some adverse event happens, but it is not really a static issue, we must ask them to spread the correct information. So in the future, I agree with Professor Larson that social media is more and more important in the future.
Yes, yep.
Okay, so given that Ms. Larson has given her point, and others professor has already given his or her point, and as I'm concerned, I'm a Taiwanese, so I already know the thoughts of our Taiwanese students and our Taiwanese citizens will do when we face the vaccine issues. However, can Professor Ms. Larson talk about her thoughts about what will she do in another region, and not in Taiwan, maybe in somewhere on the world? What will she do to prevent, to build trust and to build vaccine capacity?
I think the question is directly for you.
Well, I think the example, one example that I just gave in Denmark, I think building the social trust is allowing more engagement. The more, in the 10 years of research we've done with communities around the world, they feel totally separate from the health authorities. They feel like, I've heard many of them say, we feel like a number. We come in, 1 shot, 2 shot, 3 shot, out, 5 minutes, no time to talk, next, next, next. And they want to have a conversation. They feel like they're instructed. And I think the only model we can go with, particularly for this emerging, your generation, that having some kind of engagement, some voice, some opportunity. So I think that the example of the current system where, for instance, where this disconnect particularly became obvious was when Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, a number of these companies with a lot of pressure from governments to change the information to be positive, they diverted vaccine searches to CDCs and ministries of health. But people have told, some of the people have communicated to us, we've been there already. The only reason we went to the other things is we couldn't find what we want. And on the other side, I happened to be sitting with the Ministry of Health in Japan when this switch happened, and they said, we were overwhelmed. We didn't expect all these hits to our system. We weren't ready, and we didn't have the answers. So the good thing about it is it's put a push on official systems to get mechanisms to be more responsive. And what I didn't have time for in my talk, but one of the things that we're doing collaboratively with different countries is a machine learning kind of chat box, immediate response. I understand Taiwan CDC is doing the same thing, and I look forward to that. But figure out mechanisms for more proactive listening as well as pushing out information. Because the reality is a lot of the official sources don't have the answers to the questions people have. They have information about what the public health community thinks is important for people, not necessarily the kind of questions that they're asking.
Well, thank you. So I would like to thank all the panelists for this wonderful symposium.
Okay, thank you all for attending the lecture. So we learned a lot from all the speakers and great discussions regarding all the empirical studies results as well as the wisdom coming from dozens of years of the experiences. At the end of this great session, I'd like to invite Professor Changquan Zhan to be on stage first to having a close remark. Sure. So, Professor Zhan to be on the stage. We have a group photo for this discussion panel. Please give them a big applause.
Okay. Thank you, and I will officially conclude this year's 2019's KP Chen's Memorial Lectures, also a following workshop symposium with this machine Hastings. And thank you for coming, and thank you again, Peters and Heidi's, and I'm sure we will see you more in Taiwan, okay? This is this is your lifelong first trip, right? But will be not the last one. And you have made a lot of friends in Taiwan, and hopefully we can work together. And thanks for everyone who came in this afternoon, and hope to see you next year for the KP Chen's Memorial Lectures. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you all. We now close the lecture.